I'm sure that you know the goal of the Doha Forum is to be a platform for a discussion for some of the world's biggest challenges. That's why we've invited the kinds of speakers that we have here. We have talked about the war in Syria. We have talked about women used as a weapon of war. We have talked about the peril that journalists face, including the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and some sort of accountability there. And now we're going to pivot to what and who can make things right for the Palestinians. And here to discuss that is Rob Malley, the president and CEO of the International Crisis Group, and Chief Palestinian Negotiator Saeb Erakat. So if I can have your attention and everyone have a seat to tune into this discussion, that would be wonderful. Mr. Erakat, is your microphone working? So with that, I would like to set the stage with that question. We may not necessarily solve all of these issues here, but we're certainly going to try to push the conversation forward. So with that, gentlemen, the first question I would like to put to you is, how do we make things right for the Palestinians? Who can make things right for the Palestinians? And with that, gentlemen, I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Saeb, it's good to be here. Let me start by asking you something which is very difficult, but you've shown great personal and political courage in your life, so this won't be that hard. I want you to imagine that there's nobody in this room, and just the two of us having a private discussion as honest as we can. So I think the question was, for me, it's really the critical one. I want to paint my perception of what the situation is today for the Palestinian national movement. Many decades that you and others have led the struggle. You're no closer to a two-state solution today. In some ways, you're further away. The Palestinian security seems to be, and we're seeing these days in Ramallah, almost entirely dependent on the goodwill and cooperation of the Israeli security forces. The West Bank and Gaza are divided, and to some people at times it appears like the Palestinian Authority exerts more energy punishing Hamas and indirectly the people of Gaza, and sometimes their own people repressing demonstrations, and they exert efforts aimed at Israel. The notion of Palestinian independence of decision-making, which is one that you fought for so long, seems to be daily infringed, including by Arab countries who are meddling in Palestinian affairs. And Arab countries are now, some of them, talking about normalization with Israel. So obviously this is a pretty bleak picture, and I think the question we just got was, who could help? And there's no doubt, and I'm sure you would echo what I'm saying, that a lot of the responsibility lies with Israel and the continued occupation. But let's face it, that's what occupiers do, they occupy. And a lot of the responsibility falls on the United States, which has proved itself to be not particularly reliable. But again, let's face it, and I have some experience in it, the US typically is not that reliable. So we know those things, and we know that we can't count on President Trump and his deal of the century for all the reasons that you have very articulately said in the past. So what I'd like to talk about is, what can the Palestinians do? Let's posit, and I think people in this audience would agree, Israeli responsibility, American and international responsibility, but this is a Palestinian question for Palestinians. What have you learned from the last decades that have brought you where you are today, and what can you do, you and others and this leadership or the next leadership, to change that situation without counting on others who have proven that they shouldn't be counted upon?
Thank you, Rob, and it's good to talk to you again, and thanks to the audience, and thanks to the organizers of the conference to give us this chance to speak. No, look, as Palestinians, we count on ourselves. And we're subject to many voices, as you said now, accusations of the Palestinian Authority, of this, of that, security cooperation, as if these things have made me live under occupation for 51 years. Look, in the last 48 hours, 5 Palestinians were executed, a home was demolished, siege and enclosure continues, 4,000 housing unit settlements were announced. Prime Minister of Israel Netanyahu said today that he would legalize every single house unit of settlements in the West Bank, occupied West Bank. He's committing war crimes. And as you said, no one on earth had the record of meeting with the American administration of President Trump 37 times. In 2017, more than me. We have had 4 summit meetings between my President Mahmoud Abbas and President Trump, and 33 meetings at my level. And at the end of the day, these people are creating a new world. That world will not see a European Union. That world will not see the Arab rulers of today, trust me. And if anyone, they know, I'll begin with the Arabs. We have 22 Arab countries. We have 19 conflicts within and between Arab countries. And Trump wants to deepen this so Arabs can present more credentials and compete as who can do more services to Trump. But once we exhaust all of them, he will not maintain one single regime. Beginning with Abu Mazen. He began with Abu Mazen. EU has to disappear. He wants to see the rise of nationalism. Latin America, either Bolsonaro or Allende picture again. That's a very serious world order. As Palestinians, we've done everything in the book to make peace. You know it, Rob. You asked us to recognize Israel. We did. International law, human rights, whatever. And then at the end of the day, today, Palestinians and Israelis are at the worst they have ever been. They are in a car that's going at 200 kilometers an hour, not knowing that 10 meters away from them, there is a solid metal roadblock. What can we do more? We have nowhere to go. From the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, I am 50.9% of the population. Netanyahu, they are 49.1%. What are they going to do with me? I'm there, and I'm there to stay. Number one, I need to achieve my reconciliation with Hamas. Hamas is a Palestinian political party. We differ, and we tell them, once we differ, we go to ballots and not bullets. They need to understand this, and they need to come to the reconciliation. And we have an Egyptian agreement signed on October 12, 2017 by Hamas and Fatah, approved by all Palestinian factions, and we must implement it fully, and we're ready to implement it fully. And once again, when we differ, ballots and not bullets. And Hamas must understand this situation. And those who want to deepen the division for any reason, for instance, the Americans decide to cut $304 million from the budget of UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Work Agencies. Then they invite for a humanitarian conference for Gaza to help Gaza. 80% of Gazans are refugees. They cut $304 million, and they cry for Gaza. And please, anyone who wants to work outside the realm of Palestinian reconciliation in Gaza, he's deepening the divisions, because Netanyahu will employ 5 military divisions in order to maintain the split between the West Bank and Gaza, because they know there will not be a Palestinian state without Palestine having West Bank, Gaza as a single territorial unit. So, President Trump says he wants to fight terror and to defeat terror. I once asked him a question, Rob. Sir, did you develop the techniques to kill ideas with bullets? He didn't understand what the hell I was saying. I asked him, did you develop the technique to ban ideas to travel with or without visas? Because the only thing that travels without visas are bad ideas. Rob, as Arabs, and I'm being very frank, and I'm sitting in an Arab capital, I was touched by Madam Murad this morning as an Arab Muslim. I'm ashamed, because we have been cowards for 20 years not to stand tall for these thugs and criminals called ISIS. ISIS is number 803 in political Islam since my prophet, God bless him, died. These people are criminals and thugs. They go to mosques to use God, not to worship God. And we should have stood tall as Arabs to face them for ourselves. 99% of those who are killed by ISIS are Arabs. 99% of those who are fighting ISIS are Arabs. And Trump believes that he can defeat them by declaring Jerusalem as Israel's capital, declaring settlements legal, dropping UNRWA refugees, and dictating on me. And by cutting $844 million, closing my mission in Washington, closing his consulate in Jerusalem, denying even hospitals the aid in East Jerusalem. So if he cannot kill ideas with bullets, 2 things are needed in order to defeat extremism in this region and to defeat ISIS. One is to end the Israeli occupation. Because there is no difference between a thug and a murderer who slit the throats of Western journalists in Syria and Iraq under the name ISIS, and between a thug and a murderer who burns the Dawabshe family, an 18-month toddler, Ali Dawabshe, his brother, 5 years old, mother and father, in Douma and Nablus. That's the culture of hate. And such diseases as bigotry and racism, once they inflict underneath our skins, I don't know why. We have had a tendency to justify it, sometimes sociological reasons, psychological reasons, economic reasons, sexual reasons, and now Israel is saying security reasons. There are roads literally today in the West Bank and Gaza I cannot use because I'm a Palestinian. It's deeper apartheid system than the one that exists in South Africa. You know it. Europe knows it. Everyone knows it. And you insist on, let's play a game in town. I know and you know, and let's pretend we don't know. Quiet to you in the West means Palestinians are killed, settlements are built, homes are demolished, land is confiscated, everything is fine. If an Israeli is killed, then we have to hold these terrorists, Palestinians, accountable and cut their aid and so on. Stop it. And the last thing I want to say, since Vienna was sieged by Muslim soldiers 600 years ago, Western-Arab relations have not been defined. It's time to define these relations, Rob. Saddam Hussein cannot be a good dictator for you when he invades, has a war against Iran, and then a bad dictator when he occupies Kuwait.
So
Gaddafi cannot be Mother Teresa when he accepts $32 billion of investments from Berlusconi, and then you kill him. This must stop. The second thing that's needed to defeat ISIS is democracy in the Arab world. The real threat on us as Arabs, and listen to me very carefully, is demography. 61% of our sons and daughters are less than 19 years of age. It's time for us as Arabs to revisit our economic structure, educational structure, social structure. That's the threat. We cannot compete with this thug called Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He's promising the unemployed Palestinians that if they kill people like me and go to heaven and killed, they get 70 virgins castles. I cannot promise a Palestinian unemployed a single job or a single apartment. That's the truth. So the relations must be defined, the occupation must end, and we must, as Arabs, revisit many of our social, economic, and political structure.
So I'd like to come back. So on the question of the occupation, so the occupation must end. I think you've said that for quite some time, and many Palestinians. I assume this audience would all agree. But the question, really, what I'm struggling with, you started to go down the menu of what the Palestinians needed to do to end the occupation and to improve the lives of Palestinians. And you mentioned reconciliation. I think, again, I think many people looking from the outside wonder, you say you want reconciliation. It's not been clear that the Palestinian Authority or that Fatah have done everything in their power, understanding that Hamas is problematic, etc. But some of the sanctions that have been inflicted on the people of Gaza are, I must say, it's very hard for people who are friends of the Palestinians to understand. I'll be very honest with you.
What do you mean by sanctions?
Even the fuel deal that was just passed, it was passed
Rob,
over opposition by the...
Americans have cut 800...
You know what punishment I'm talking about.
We don't need to... No, I don't know. I'm going to tell you what's happening. Americans have cut $844 million...
Saab, I don't want to talk about the Americans.
Let me finish, please. $304 million to UNRWA, $230 million of infrastructure projects through USAID. There are roads literally began in Rafah, Gaza, Jericho, Jenin that stopped. $90 million from Jerusalem hospitals and NGOs, including the only cancer center we have in the Augusta Victoria in Jerusalem. $195 million help. So we have today, in the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, $196 million. Our revenues, taxes, customs, aid from Japan, Europe, Arab countries. 100 million are spent in the West Bank, 96 million are spent in Gaza. That's what we have. That's what we have, and that's what we're doing. And so we know that people are suffering in the West Bank, people are suffering in Jerusalem, people are suffering in Gaza, but President Trump does not know, that the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Holy Sepulchre Church are not a real estate deal. They're not for sale.
Trust me,
right?
Again, I don't think...
So what kind of... That's the money I have, and that's the money, the way it's spent. I'm unaccountable, and look at the website of the government and see how the money is spent.
again, I'm certainly not here to defend the Trump administration's policies. You know me well enough for that. To tell you how the world, your friends look at it, even when there's efforts being made by others to come in and help on the humanitarian side, the people of Gaza, there seems to be a view among some in Ramallah that is going to be, that's helping Hamas and that's dividing the Palestinians, when in fact things are going to have to be done to help the people of Gaza. But okay, we may disagree.
We never stopped anybody, but what we're telling people, please make the help to Gaza through the reconciliation process.
But that process is
not the
going
fragmented
anywhere.
one day for electricity, one day for water. We have an agreement in Cairo signed by Hamas and Fatah on October 12, 2017. Read it. Article number 1, the national consensus government should shoulder its responsibilities in the West Bank as in the Gaza Strip in accordance with the basic law. We're ready. Our hands are extended to them.
Okay.
That's the point. But now, you know that I cannot have a Palestinian state without Gaza, and I cannot have a Palestinian state in Gaza. Gaza needs $1.2 billion annually. Anybody can afford it? Even those in Qatar who pay $15 million now, next month, how long can they pay? It's up. We need this help
So you mentioned
from all countries to be part of the reconciliation plan as a comprehensive, gradual. And we tell Hamas, we look at what happened in the UN when Netanyahu went with the US to brand them as terrorists. Abu Mazen said, no, they are part of the Palestinian people. I want to have reconciliation with them. Because if they were to brand them as terrorists, how can I form a government with them? They want to continue the fragmentation between the West Bank and Gaza because they know there will be not.
So, Saeb, you mentioned reconciliations. Let's put that aside. Number one. But what are the other things that see? My organization looks at conflict resolution. I've studied in the past national liberation movement. So obviously, I think we both know that a divided national liberation movement has never succeeded. But that's one thing. What are the other things that you think, given all the challenges you face, and you mentioned them, and we've left a lot out, what you face today, what can the Palestinians do differently from what they've done in the past to get what they deserve in terms of independence and whatever outcome?
Look, if you insinuate that we commit mistakes...
No, I don't.
No, we do.
Of course you do. No, but what should you do differently is my question.
We're not perfect. At least, unlike others, when mistakes are committed, you know it. You read about it. We are not perfect. We are as normal as the Nigerians, the Americans, the British, the Qataris, the Saudis, anybody. We make mistakes, and what we need to do is to have a policy of zero tolerance to any violations of human rights and so on. And we're looking at it. I'm not saying it's not happening, but I'm saying look at it. Look at the human rights report. Look at the way we cooperated in the last report. Abu Mazen formed an immediate committee headed by the Prime Minister, I'm a member of it, to review every case of the 117 cases mentioned in the last 3 years. That's serious. We need to improve our institution building. But before I'm telling you that we need reconciliation, institution building, improve our education, economy, and so on, are we sustainable as a Palestinian Authority under the pressure that we're under by Netanyahu? Netanyahu is destroying the two-state solution, and he wants to replace it with one-state, two-system, and he's fully backed by President Trump, all right? Look, the last conversation I had with Mr. Kushner was in the White House in the 37th meeting. I tell him, Jared, tomorrow you're supposed to sign, the president's supposed to sign on the waiver not to move the embassy. He said, we're not going to sign it. I said, what do you mean you're not going to sign it? The president promised us in the White House, May 3rd, he promised President Mahmoud Abbas that he will not take any step that may preempt or prejudge the Jerusalem issue, and he would leave it for 12 months for negotiations. He said, it's our business, and we conduct our policies in accordance with our interests. I told him, look, if you do this, you would have disqualified yourself from any role in the peace process. He replied, don't threaten me, shouting. I said, don't stand guards on my lips. You would have disqualified yourself for any role in the peace process. And then he said, you know, you don't know the changes that's happening around you in the Arab world. I told him, Wallah, the best seat for me is to be a student. Teach me. Don't be sarcastic, he shouted. I said, I'm not being sarcastic. What do you mean by changes? Do you think Arab countries will open embassies in Tel Aviv and accept Jerusalem with Al-Aqsa Mosque as Israel's capital? None of them. I was in Washington for medical treatment, And everyone who came there to see you, Jared, they came out of courtesy to visit me. And to them, Jerusalem is a red line. All of them. Saudis, Qataris, Egyptians, Jordanians. I'm talking about the people who came to visit me. Bahrainis, even foreigners. So what are you talking about? He said, look, this is our business and this is our policies. So I replied to him saying the following question. If you do this, you will bring Israelis and Palestinians to the points of disasters. And once Theodore Roosevelt, an American president, said the White House is an office of international morality. And he's right. But this White House needs giant statesmen, not real estate agents. And those who depend on such policies are doomed. Look, I'm not a country. I'm under occupation. When I leave Jericho to Doha, I have to check Israeli permission. Palestine and Jerusalem are not for sale. My real problem is not my mistakes. I commit mistakes like everybody else.
No, I think
the problem is the continuation of an occupation that goes on for 51 years, that you tolerate, that you support, that you reward. Look at Australia yesterday. Look at Australia. From all countries on earth. Their trade with the Arab countries increased between 2011 till 2017 by 52%. $17.2 billion Arabs. 14 billion exports to you. And yet, Morrison decides to recognize West Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And some Arabs say, no, that's okay. The question of Jerusalem legally is all at the table, East and West, at the negotiating. So if you take West Jerusalem out of the table, it means I have to negotiate and divide East Jerusalem with the Israelis. That's unfair. Against international law, that's shameful. That should stop.
So again, maybe we should take some questions, but because where I must admit, I'm puzzling, and we've had this discussion now for many years. It's not a matter of mistakes. It's a matter of having a proactive agenda, proactive strategy, given the fact that not only can you not count on Israel, you can't count on the US, you may not even be able to count on the rest of the world. Many of them are preoccupied with other things. What can you do? That's the question that we
I was 12 years old when the occupation came into Jericho. I was jailed when I was 13 years old. I'm 63 years old now. I'm a grandfather of 7. The 8th is on the road, and believe me, my grandchildren will be much more nationalist Palestinians determined to achieve their freedom and independence than me. And if I don't have peace, nobody else will. This is not a threat. This is a reality.
But what would be interesting would be to see what that next generation might do in order to achieve those goals. I see there are already some, I don't know what these ones and twos means. It probably means there's some questions. Do you want to take some? What do you say?
Of course, why not?
Okay, why don't we do that?
So you've spoken a lot about what you...
I can't hear you.
What you dislike about the Trump administration's stance on the issues. What would your ideal U.S. support look like? What would the U.S. negotiators lend to the Palestinian people, and what would they ultimately help your positions with?
I was asked this question by a gentleman who came to see me from the United States very recently. Let me hold the names. I asked them to look at the White House website, 27th January 2017. American position was, by the way, all American administration, including the one that Rob worked for, they're always sided with Israel. Israel is part of their domestic political life, and they have always sided with Israel. But at least they had a position, that their position is 2 states on the basis of 67 lines, mutually agreed swaps, settlements are a legal obstacle to peace, all core issues must be negotiated. You know, sir, in every single meeting of the 37 meetings I had with the American administration, with all due respect to them, there's nothing personal. I urged them to set me up with the Israelis. I told them only Israelis and Palestinians can deliver the decisions required for peace, not you. And you know what they told me? We will not allow this. They believe they can dictate a solution on me by twisting my arms, by blackmailing me, by cutting my aid. And all I'm simply telling them, I did not pick a fight with you. I did not confront you. Palestine and Jerusalem are not for sale. It's not a real estate deal. It's a historic, cultural, narrative, religious issue for me. I'm not asking Israelis to fast Ramadan with me or to go to churches Sundays with me. And they should not ask me to go to synagogues with them on Saturdays. Judaism to me was never a threat, is not a threat, will never be a threat. This is my Quran. My conflict is not a religious one. It's a political one, territorial one, national one. This administration is determined to turn it into a religious conflict. Some of them told me, how can a man like me, a professor, 14 books, 57 studies, how can I believe that somebody comes from Mecca to Jerusalem and ascends to heaven in 15 seconds? And I told them it's much easier for me to believe this than to believe that someone opened the sea with a stick or put his hands on the eye of the blind and make him see. Leave religion alone. Leave the people, faiths alone. These people think that it was God's will that Jerusalem will be Israel's capital. That's very dangerous. Don't push Palestinians and Israelis towards the shores of a religious conflict. That's what I'm urging the American administration to do. I'm not asking him to be fair, because you know what? Your relation with your wife, with your colleague, with any relationships on earth will not survive one day if it's not fair. And how can these people want to dictate a solution on me by the concept called peace based on the truth? Accepting settlements, taking Jerusalem off the table, taking the refugee question off the table, denying me of any signs of sovereignty, and then when I stand tall for my rights, my freedom, my independence, my honor, they accuse me of terrorism and being anti-peace. All right? I think President Trump, whenever he hears an Israeli is killed or a Palestinian is killed, he should look very carefully at the mirror to know who's responsible for it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Saeb Erakat, I am a refugee from Jaffa. I see that the situation of Palestine is getting worse every day. Do you think you and the leadership have given everything that you can give, and it's time for a change of direction? Have you done an analysis and decided to come up with a new strategy, a new leadership, a new start for the rest of us? Is it possible to address this honestly? Is it, I can see that you're only complaining. Can you tell us what the new strategy is? Who is going to help achieve it? Who are the new partners? What is your, position for the future? It's becoming a humanitarian issue, and the whole thing is getting lost. Please give us an honest answer. What is the strategy now?
So that was my question too, but apparently you have 1 minute to answer. So Saeb, if you could
My answer to you, sir, we have 13 million Palestinians worldwide. And the PLO is responsible for all of the Palestinians. I ask you to ask yourself in the morning, what can I do to help bring Palestine back to the map? Our strategy is very well known. We stand tall with international law. We have accepted the two-state solution. We have accepted the international legality, United Nations resolutions, and so on. Everyone in the world, Europeans, Americans, Asians, Latins, Africans, they told us once you go this path, you will achieve your goal. And they did not deliver. So if you accuse me of not serving you or not doing this, in 2017, today your people in Palestine are 99% literacy rate. The World Bank report reported that in the last years, no country in the third world did in 63 years than as we did in 9 years in building institutions, educational, judicial, and so on. I'm not trying to glorify the picture. I'm not saying that we're void of mistakes. I think we're the only Arab country and Muslim country that joined the Political Rights of Women Convention. We have a 30% quota for women in any election there is. So you can look at it any way you want. You can score points at me. I cannot stand guards at your lips. My strategy is to steadfast in my country. I have 4 children. I told them you can do whatever you do in your life as long as you work in Palestine and you're married in Palestine and you stay in Palestine. And as I told you, my strategy is to steadfast and to remain there and to build my institutions and to help my people in their education, in their health, in their roads, in their infrastructure, in everything humanly possible to maintain their stay in their land, in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Because I seek peace, but my strategy is that my peace will not be at any cost. And listen very carefully to me. International law specified for me the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem as my capital on the 1967 lines. I have 37 kilometers shores in the Dead Sea, 20 kilometers in the Mediterranean, safe passage under my sovereignty between the West Bank and Gaza, right of return to Palestinian refugees in accordance with 194. I will not allow them to use the sword of settlements, dictations, killings, siege and closure and confiscation of land to make me deliver concessions or say that I don't have a strategy or do I change my course. My course, I was born as a Palestinian for one reason, to bring Palestine back to the map with East Jerusalem as its capital. And peace will not happen without Palestine on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital coming back to the map. Not this year, next year, not next year, in 10 years. I come from a town called Jericho. It's 11,000 years old. We celebrated this year. I'm there, and I'm there to stay. And my strategy is to stay. And I know it's painful, and I know it's hard, and I know we have funerals every day, and I know every single household, including my household, have martyrs, prisoners, wounded people, but Palestine and Jerusalem is worth every effort and every sacrifice we make. This is my strategy.
I think that's it. So this will have to be continued. Thanks, Saeb.